Welcome back once again to Kevin Pollak's Chat Show. I am, believe it or not, still Chat Show. How are you? Sorry, what? Less about you. Just back from Chicago, and boy, are my corrupt politicians tired. I didn't realize that they could outdo, and let's all learn how to do Jerry Lewis together, will we? One word, you'll pronounce it with me, and this is how you'll learn to do Jerry Lewis. Ready? Watch the volume, it's going to spike. Blagojevich! All right, I thought that they had peaked with the Blagojevich. Oh no. Jesse Jackson Jr. won re-election while in some sort of nut house rehab for bipolar. Wasn't even there. Didn't even campaign. No, that's not corrupt, but there are other issues that were all over the news while I was there. On top of which, there was some other, oh man, I should have written down names. It was mostly on a need to care basis for me, but I was just kind of, thrilled that the Chicago tradition of the wildly corrupt politician is alive and well. I just thought that was fantastic. So hats off, not this one, but in general. I want to thank everyone who came out to the Fabulous Improv. What a great room that is. Big room. Big. We had mostly sold out shows, but the room is big. And more importantly, I moved 70 books. Sorry? Sound like you said something about merch. Hey, have you seen my new book? It just came out last week. I was on the Fallon, the Today Show, Craig Ferguson this Tuesday, pre-recorded. But it went well, so they tell me. Are we putting up a picture of the book? Thank you. There it is now. There's what the cover of the book looks like. It's available in your store. So I was in Chicago and I found out, Jamie, you said you got this from young adult?
What? If you sign the book, then they have to sell it.
If the author signs a book in a store, the bookstore cannot ship them back to the publisher. They are considered sold.
Yeah, because Mavis, Charlize's character, was signing all the Waverly Prep books in like her hometown Barnes and Noble, and they're like, no, we can't send them. No, we can't send them back to the publisher.
Right. So no one stopped me. Thankfully, I went to 3 different Barnes and Nobles, including a 4th one at the airport. I was stopping at random stores. So I'm going to be coming to a mall near you. That's my book tour now. I've decided to forget all the national talk shows. I'm just going to go from city to city, go to every Barnes and Noble on the planet because there's still 7. You're not buffering. We just have a bad connection. We're not even streaming live, and he still does the buffering gag. You got some balls. Anyway, one of my favorite expressions my dad would use, I don't even know where he got it. I never even grilled him on it. He would say, how are you getting to school? You bringing your lunch? I don't know why that made me laugh every fucking time. Sammy! Where's Sam? It's weird. It's just Jamie talking to the people in the room. There's no Sammy.
Elaine and I are talking about if we owned a movie theater.
Oh. You want to catch us up to speed? What would happen?
I said I would show crap like all 7 Police Academy movies in a row.
In a row, back to back. Marathons. Just do marathons of sequels. And then have... I would
show good movies too.
The Carradine brothers show up for signings. All the brothers. Sammy's off, we presume, shooting Do No Harm, which we also presume is still a mid-season show for the National Broadcasting Company, coming to you in February, apparently. Jamie, are you excited for the holidays? They're bearing down on us.
There's some things I enjoy about the holidays, like the I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas song.
Should we bring in...
my hippo?
Yeah.
I have a singing hippo.
We're going to do at least a show
a demonstration.
December. Yeah, we'll do a demo.
And I like my Christmas tree is all Simpsons.
All the ornaments.
All ornaments are Simpsons. Not a single ornament is repeated. And the star is Maggie in her snowsuit.
In her snowsuit. And I can tell you there are at least 70 ornaments all over that tree.
And not a single repeat.
No repeats. How do I know that? I went a little nuts on eBay. There you have it. I would not be outbid. I went crazy. But I learned, the system, you get your bid in there the last 15 seconds, and sometimes I went nuts. Oh, really? You're going to pay $7 for that one? How about 9, fucko? I'm going 9. In your face. Would you subscribe to us on iTunes? Would it kill you? Thanks for all the recent reviews. Write some more, please. Thank you. How do you watch the show? That's one of the things you can write in and tell us at contact@kevinpollak'schatshow.com. Let us know how you do KPCS. We'd love to hear from you. If you send in a Larry King game that's worth a damn, we'll send you a T-shirt. But we don't have one this week because you're kind of sucking hind teat, just a little bit. I have good news for you, though. If the outer crew is ready. I appeared on Larry King's new show on Hulu. And I created a meta moment for us, Chat Show fans, that, well, I don't want to say it should be on a continuous loop in your house and on your computer, but yeah. I got Larry King to play the Larry King game. And he says to me, wait a sec, as I tell him the rules, I need a bad Larry King impression. I need you to go share something about yourself that nobody wants to know, Larry. You know how you do. And then go to the phones. The name of the city should be funny sounding. Wait a minute. You want me to do a bad Larry King impression? How do I do that? And I said, you've been doing it for 15 years. Set me up like fucking T-ball. That was just beautiful. Do we have a clip of that? It's a perfect day. I've been told that they haven't posted it yet on Larry's. They didn't have an air date yet, and I could tell they were probably doing as many. They're banking as many shows as they can. They know Larry's pterodactyl has passed away, but they don't know when Larry will actually go. So I think they've banked like 47 shows that haven't aired yet. So we're in the queue, if you will. My crew, of course, will be all over that shit and will let me know when I can let you know, and I will tweet it out. Twitches. Thanks for all that who retweeted, actually, the Hollywood Poker first celebrity charity tournament that went down on Saturday. We had a full house of, that's right, a little poker lingo, slipped it right in. Full house of players and over 60, I think 70 celebrities playing as well, with a live chat room, people there talking smack at the celebrities. And the whole damn thing was actually won by a celebrity, which pisses me off to no end. I was hoping one of you, the fans who play at Hollywood Poker via Facebook, would win. But that fucker Jimmy Woods won. How ridiculously unfair is that? I say, wildly unfair. But look out, we're up and running. Go to your Facebook and your Hollywood Poker and play yourself some Play for Free. It's a Play for Free app, folks. Like you may have been doing on the Zynga. I think that's all I've got for you at this time. Book tour, talk shows, subscribe to us, write reviews, go fuck yourself. I think we're done. Yeah, thank you. Oh, this week I believe we'll see the return of Talkin' Walkin'. One last threat. I know I've been threatening, but I kind of went a little nuts in Chicago on stage and found I got a groove back, and I think it's ready once again to bring back Talkin' Walkin'. If you're looking for that, Walkin' spelled I-N like talkin', so that his family can't sue me. Just to give you a little preview, all right, it's me. I have a friend though. We sit in the dining room and we talk nonsense for an hour. It doesn't really matter what the subject is, but you could write to us, funnywords@talkinwalkin.com. And questions, contact @talkinwalkin.com as well. Maybe you enjoyed a little tete-a-tete on Opie and Anthony. Jay Moore was in there, and he kept giving me props, so I kind of buttoned up a little bit. Yeah, that was surreal, actually, being on Opie and Anthony. And Jay, who I constantly give credit, including in the book, for kind of starting the Walken impersonation craze. And then according to the New York Times today, I said, well, everyone, if you're doing Shatner these days, you're doing my Shatner. Okay, I didn't say that. The interviewer said to me, you realize, of course, everyone who's doing Shatner today is doing your Shatner. And I said to him, you said that, not me. Guess how it came out in the New York Times Sunday today? It came out as a quote out of my face. So I'd like to say to the New York Times, the last bastion of proper journalism, go fuck yourself. Okay. My guest today, I am extremely excited because we've had a few writers in here from the film and television world. Our last one, I believe, yelled at Jamie. Hopefully that will not happen today. You all remember our wonderful time with Dan Harmon. Yeah. So I was reaching out to this particular creator of amazing television and runner of amazing television shows before breaking news, or we may refer to it as Black Friday. I don't know. Maybe you got a call Thursday. I don't know. I read about it on Friday.
I found out about it around the same time as everyone else.
Yeah, that's the wonderful world of social media, isn't it?
It is. There's no time to get bad news and be able to call the people involved. Literally, I got a call from ABC saying, we're sorry you're going to make your 13 episodes, but no episodes beyond that.
Right.
And I said, well, let me call Hawaii, where we film our show Last Resort, and let me tell the actors. And as I was getting ready to do that, I looked on my Twitter and saw that the news had broken about 15 minutes earlier. So fortunately, I didn't find out that way, but lots of people found out before me. So
you could have found out that way.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's ABC's fault. Because they have to put certain things in place for notifications, and word gets out, and there's all sorts of publications and websites that want to be the first to report things, and so it just gets out there. So.
Well, because there's no news on broadcast, Shawn Ryan, everybody, bring those paws together. Shawn Ryan, thank you. Hey, that's not recorded. That's live, unlike the show. I take this just for the alcohol, in case you're wondering. Yeah, I mean, there's no real news on broadcast television anymore. It's or cable. It's all opinions. So I think Twitter and the social medias love breaking news. Just love it. I mean, I follow something called Breaking News as a Twitter handle.
Yes.
I don't even know who it is. I'm sure it's one of the networks. Probably CNN. I don't know. But I follow breaking news.
Have you ever done this? I'll wake up in the morning and I'll check Twitter and my feed goes back a couple hours and something happens. And you could skip forward to the beginning of your Twitter feed and find out what's happening right now, but you instead spend the next 10 minutes sort of living through that 2-hour period. Oh, what happened? It's almost becomes a weird thing where you want to experience it the way people did in real life for 2 hours, but you want to experience it through Twitter for 5 minutes and get to the end.
I'm going to say you just created a new television show. It's called
I need a new one.
This Last Hour. And every week we go backwards. Yeah, no, absolutely. Unfortunately, it takes me then, an extra 15 minutes to get off the shitter. That's the problem. I'm reading the last 2 hours on Twitter. Shitter. Anybody? Please be seated. So, ABC says to you, speaking of going back in time, 3 meetings this time. Listen, it's 8 o'clock. Lost was launched at 8 o'clock. Don't be so concerned.
I heard that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And having been through several incarnations, several shows now, some you created, some you ran. We'll talk about the unit with David Mamet, another Chicago boy. Boy, Joe Mantegna told an amazing moment where he first met Mamet sitting on the steps outside the theater, and Mamet says to him, "You're an actor, right?" Yeah, Joe Mantegna. Hey, nice to meet you. Well, what do you do? I'm a playwright. Maybe someday we'll work together. That was a moment. That actually happened. And then the other moment when Joe was on Broadway with Glengarry Glen Ross, and Mamet comes in and says, I just spoke to the studio. They're going to do the movie. Pacino's playing your part. Here's 2 scripts that I'm going to direct. I want you to be the lead in both. And it was
House of Games.
House of Games
and Homicide.
No, the other movie was something Things.
Things Change.
Yes, yes.
He also did Homicide.
And then in Homicide.
Yeah. No, that's where I was introduced to Joe Mantegna, was House of Games. I discovered that movie on videotape when I was in college.
Extraordinary.
And had been a big fan of David's playwriting work. In fact, I was I was an awful actor in college, but I acted in a couple of Mamet plays in college. And
Which one? Remember?
Yeah, sure. I played James Link in Glengarry Glen Ross, the guy who's getting stung, the guy who wants to pull out of the deal, and Al Pacino / Joe Mantegna's character doesn't want him to pull out of the deal. And then I played Danny in Sexual Perversity in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
Back when I had more hair.
Sure.
And just a student production of that. So I was into Mamet and found out he had directed a movie, House of Games, and and I just wore that out on videotape and was like, who is this? Joe Mantegna guy?
Joe was beyond magnificent and effervescent, and just had like a 40s kind of movie star written all over him in a weird way, while being wildly contemporary as well.
Real man,
Just fantastic.
And saying David's words, which are just so sharp and they cut through so much stuff, just coming out of his mouth,
and delivered it in such a way that didn't feel like we were necessarily listening to the Mamet cadence, the way we're sometimes spoon-fed. We're spoon-fed. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I'm telling you we're spoon-fed. Do you hear me? Do you hear these words? These words that I'm telling you that we're spoon-fed. But when coming out of Joe, it doesn't sound like that.
It takes a special actor, I think, to say Dave's words, and those that can say them well, it creates a kind of music on screen that is
so experiencing that as a fan,
yes.
When you come to your own casting on a piece that you've written, are you waiting to hear the music? Someone who captures your cadence doesn't realize that's exactly what you had in mind? Or is it a combination of that versus...
Yeah, I learned pretty quickly that it's never going to be the way you have it in your mind as a writer. I certainly have a kind of musical rhythm and style to my words that I hear. And then quickly I learned nobody's going to say it exactly the way I want. And I can either try to force someone to and not get their best performance, or I can appreciate what they're doing and maybe try to move them a degree or two, one way or the other. But that's part of the fun I've found, is finding actors who will say it in a way that I don't anticipate, and that it's better than I thought of in my head. I have to remind myself I was a mediocre actor in college. I didn't make the best choices as an actor, and I'm lucky enough to work with world-class people, and I'd be an idiot not to hear what their take is on it. And then sometimes we find a middle ground between the two.
Right.
But oftentimes, I think of Michael Chiklis in The Shield. I think, working with Andre Braugher now in Last Resort, these actors find things, they find nuances that I didn't anticipate, and they make my work look better to other people.
Well, it's an extraordinary thing, which is why Mamet remains a conundrum, because it seems like the best possible scenario is brilliantly written, brilliantly executed by separate artists who collaborate, but the performers are allowed to make it their own, as they say, and lift it off the page, as they say, and breathe their own unique individual life into pre-existing characters for the writer. So you made peace with this early on, you decided.
Yes, I did, and I don't think my writing is nearly as distinctive as David's is. There are certain writers, whether it's Mamet, whether it's Aaron Sorkin, whose signature is so specific that the performers really do have to come to them. I always prided myself on being someone where I wanted the writing to be invisible, and I just wanted the whole to exist, and I wanted to be able to move between different genres, between different things, and in a way, I thought I'd have more ability to do that if I didn't have a signature thing. It becomes a little hard sometimes to see a 7th, 8th, 9th David Mamet thing, or to see sometimes Aaron Sorkin's thing, because you start listening for those things that you recognize.
By the way, so is the civilian audience now, who are yelling and screaming at the newsroom, saying, why are people talking in speeches? Can't they just...
Having said that, I just picked two writers that I adore, and I watched every episode of the Newsroom,
Of course.
and I had certain kind of story and structure issues at times with it, and yet I just let it wash over me, and I love the way Aaron Sorkin writes.
I can't get enough of it, and yet it's annoying as hell. You know. So let's continue down the last resort, or just last resort. Because the last resort I've been to, it's also outside of Hawaii, where you shot. So you make that call to your cast and crew, and what I mean, rather than me just assuming how it's received, what is that like for you and them?
Well, listen, our ratings had been really on the cusp, or a little bit below the cusp, for a few weeks now. So it didn't come as a huge shock. We were all hoping for a bounce. We were all. The funny thing is, there's so much data now on viewership that you can always find something that looks good for your show. For us, it was, hey, we're doing better than that time slot's done in the last couple of years, even though we're not doing well overall. It's a brutal time slot. We're up against Big Bang Theory, which is the #1 comedy on TV. We're up against X Factor. We're up against NFL football games on the NFL Network.
You had no
chance. Where that draw a lot of men, and men were liking our show. So it wasn't a huge shock, and yet it's still a disappointment. I would compare it to if you have a relative who becomes terminally ill, and you know it's coming, and yet there's still a shock when it happens. I would describe it that way. It's really disappointing for the people who work on the show, the crew, who work on a weekly paycheck.
Yeah.
Really, the fact is, I'll still be able to feed my family, and I'm crushingly disappointed creatively that we won't be able to continue the story, and yet I'm very clear that there are people who are now going to be out of a job in a few weeks.
Right.
With this decision, and these are people who were working 14, 16-hour days on behalf of the show, and I feel very bad for them.
Yeah, and you would think, again, as soon as you start explaining what the show is up against and how you want a female demographic, you cast in a way that suggests that you can draw them into these storylines. But at its core, you kind of know, a little bit of a bet has been hedged that it's a male-oriented initially, or somewhere.
Well, there was a military aspect to the show that research showed kept some women at a distance, even though the women who did come to the show tended to like it, and we thought there was growth potential for women. But the ads and the basic concept of the show is something that initially drew more men than women.
So putting it up against Big Bang Theory makes sense because that's a younger.
Well, Big Bang Theory. Listen, I'm good friends with Bill Prady, who co-created that show, and it's the third time I've had a show go up against Big Bang Theory. I was running Lie to Me for a year.
Right.
Up against that. I had the Chicago Code up against him, and then CBS moved his show to Thursdays, and now they put and I just said to him, my God, when can I stop going against your show? You're killing me.
Right, but is there something about when you're up against a show that is that level of juggernaut? It's not just the #1 comedy.
Right.
It's got to be the #1 everything.
It gets men, it gets women.
Yeah.
You don't get to be that big without drawing from all quadrants, and people love that show, and they are used to watching that show. I'll tell you what ABC's thinking was putting it on at Thursday 8 o'clock.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting
The first point was we got to put something there. we don't go dark at 8 o'clock on Thursdays. They had some initial success, I think it was 3 years ago, with a show called Flash Forward that premiered big, and then they didn't think the show creatively lived up to it and eventually cratered, but at least they got an audience at the beginning, an audience that was a little bit more male as well. They thought this was a big, bold concept that would attract people. They were worried about putting something that felt a little bit more normal, felt a little bit more regular in that slot, that it would just get swamped and disappear. This was the kind of show that they felt they could lure studios to put movie advertisements on. Thursday night is the biggest night to advertise movies because all these movies are opening the following night.
Right. Well, that's supportive.
So there was a lot of rationale. This was the first year that the NFL had put games on Thursday nights starting from week 1 of the season on. So this was something new that I'm not sure ABC completely took into account, that other shows before got to have 8-9 weeks of Thursdays not going against football games drawing 8 to 9 million people, which doesn't sound like a ton, but those are men who might have been
It's a ton
convinced.
these days.
Yes, it is. As
That's the other thing, is
fractured.
the landscape has changed so much. So it's exciting to get a show launched on a network, but I do know from reading your dossier, sir, that I sense the overview is that the time you had to work up scripts for The Shield, by only having to do 13, the time you had to break stories and go down certain paths and then go, oh, no, we can't go down that path, let's start over again with episode 2, afforded you, it seems like a less pressurized, but that's an inexperienced overview.
Well, in some ways you're right. There was less pressure there. Here's the ways that there was more pressure. It was very clear that FX was banking a whole new strategy on what they wanted their network to be on the success or lack of success on The Shield. And I was very aware that people who had put themselves on the line to back a guy who'd never run a show before were counting on me to deliver a show that they would be proud of, that critics would like, and that viewers would watch. And so that was a ton of pressure.
But they picked a winner. You branded the network. Let's be honest.
That's the way it turned out, but we certainly did not know it then. And I was very aware of my own limitations. I was very aware of what I didn't know. And so one of the things you were talking about is the time we had was something that was built in to essentially allow me and my staff, all of which was very young, or not even young, but inexperienced really in television, to learn what our mistakes would be and to correct them. I know so much more now, and I can avoid some of the pitfalls. But with The Shield, we gave ourselves some extra time to come up with those stories. We worked a lot of late hours. We threw out a lot of stories. We threw out a lot of pages, and really held ourselves to a high standard. And I've tried to maintain that with every other show that I've done, even the shows that haven't done well ratings-wise. And Last Resort is certainly proof of that. I'm really proud creatively of the show, and one thing I've learned is you can control what you can control, and one thing I can't control is what Nielsen viewers watch.
Well, there's an interesting debate, I think, and I'm very curious about your take on it, which is mass appeal means mass success, means more creative freedom for the next thing you do. Let's face it, at some point on the train called show business, it becomes apparent that everything you do is really about the next thing you might do, while wanting very much to live and work in the present. However, to discerning tastes, or so it seems, the great drama, certainly awarded by the Emmys every year, is being done on the cable networks, year in, year out. The viewership has dwindled now on the broadcast networks to a startling rate, where Mad Men only gets 1 million, 1.5 million, and people are scratching their heads saying, how is that a show? The networks are down to 6, 7 million themselves. How much longer do you think that broadcast networks remain the larger teat or the lure of larger numbers? Certainly the budget to shoot with, HBO is still spending, I think, more than everybody. Their numbers are not magnificent.
Their numbers don't matter, though. All that matters to them is subscribers.
Right. Do you believe that? Don't you think somewhere at HBO there's people are counting numbers?
Here's what I think is the order of importance to HBO. Subscribers.
Emmys.
ratings.
Yeah.
I don't think they don't care about ratings, but I think that they think that ratings will have an effect on subscribers.
Right.
That really popular shows, and you go back to their heyday, where they had The Sopranos and they had Sex and the City. That was perfect for them because those are two very different audiences.
Right.
And you think about those people who, and that's why a show like Girls right now, which I really like, is a big thing for them because it's so different than their other shows.
Right.
That here's something that might get 25 and 30-year-old women to actually sign up for HBO. It's people who don't even have a TV, who don't have cable, who might say, "Oh, I'm hearing about this show, I want to watch." That's why that's a big deal, even though the viewership numbers for that show aren't that big.
Right.
So I think HBO cares about those things, and plus they have what's important to them is a cumulative rating. And this is starting to become true of networks as well, because people want to just get that overnight number and declare winners and declare losers. Another metric for us that was looking good for Last Resort that gave us some hope that we might get more is that we were getting a huge bump percentage-wise from DVR use after 3 days.
Right.
People who probably were watching football live or watching Big Bang Theory live recorded us and then would watch us later. And on HBO, they really care how many people during the course of a week are watching this new episode of Game of Thrones.
Right.
Doesn't matter how many people watch Sunday night at 10 o'clock for the first viewing.
Well, that might be the bigger question. How much longer does that matter? Clearly there's a whole generation that's growing up that is unaware of time slots.
Yes.
Doesn't even understand them.
Unaware of networks.
Right.
If I asked my two children what are the 4 major networks,
They would say,
I don't think they'd be able to answer that question.
Right. It's pretty fantastic in a way. I mean, as a showrunner, as a creator of television programming, to have it open up that wide now, that has to be exciting.
Yeah, there's so many more opportunities. When I was first in Los Angeles trying to break into TV writing and get a job, there were certainly fewer jobs. It was a bigger deal to get on staff of somewhere. And you had a couple HBO shows, but mostly it was the 4 big networks. And this was, or maybe the WB was just coming into being. There weren't that many possibilities. And now there are so much more. So we talk about these dwindling ratings, but the fact is people are watching as much, if not more TV than they did 20 years ago, because it is more convenient for them. They set their season pass to the shows they want to watch, and then they watch when they want to watch.
Right.
The real question will come, because it's amazing to me that these people with DVRs, and so many of them still watch the commercials. I mean, the data shows that people are sitting through the commercials. A lot of times they'll just push play, and the way they would go around their...
Are they sitting through the commercial, or during the commercials are they doing this?
I think they're probably doing that. They're forgetting to fast forward.
The mindset is this is how it's done.
But that's where the real threat, I think, is coming to TV, and where you're seeing more of a subscription model, kind of like HBO has. I don't want to bore your viewership, but a big deal in the last year is that the major networks, the Foxes and CBSs and NBCs, have been able to get programming fees out of the cable companies and the satellite companies that pay them in addition to what they're getting advertising-wise, and that's making the networks a little bit more profitable. And so you're going to see that. And my guess is you're going to see other networks try to do what FX and AMC have done on the basic cable front. We're seeing Showtime really take on HBO.
Yeah, and
premium
Stars
cable,
doing
Stars
Boss.
and Cinemax.
Yeah,
and
they're all making the effort.
all this stuff. They're all making the effort because the upside is really there. It only takes 1 or 2 shows, as FX showed with The Shield and Nip Tuck and then Rescue Me.
Yeah, and then AMC with Mad Men and Breaking Bad.
All it takes is 1 or
overnight.
2, and it changes your entire company's fortunes. I mean, the value of FX now compared to 10 years ago when The Shield premiered is just
ridiculous.
Astronomically higher.
Yeah. It was a NASCAR.
It was NASCAR. It was Beverly Hills Now 2-0 repeats. It was Buffy the Vampire Slayer repeats.
So some people were pissed at you.
MASH repeats.
For removing.
You know who was pissed at me was Howard Stern, because he had a show called Son of the Beach that was there. That when the new regime came in, they sort of swept it out and were like, we're going to try something new. And I heard that he kind of blamed us a little bit.
I'm sure.
For the Son of the Beach
being so damn good.
Which I didn't have anything to do with that. But I think he held a grudge for a little bit against us.
That's a good enemy to have. So once you get past the initial, all right, everything's riding on you, newcomer, with your little show, The Shield. Once you get past that, how soon after before the sphincter loosens a little? I mean, how long did it actually take to brand that network for The Shield to, I mean, Golden Globe and Emmy in the first season?
It only took a few weeks, and I, professionally, I consider myself, the term I always use with myself is I'm a lazy perfectionist.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Which means that essentially I want to do as little work as possible to make it as good as it possibly can be, and unfortunately that demands a lot of work.
Yes.
It's not like, I want to not be watching a football game or play a video game or have fun, but I want the shows to be really good. And so, if anything, after that first season, we set ratings records.
You debuted at 5 million viewers.
Which was a big deal at that time, would be a big deal now,
yeah.
but was considered impossible for basic cable to do that. It was a shocker. Literally Peter Lagori and Kevin Riley showed up that morning with champagne on our set. They thought things would go well. No one thought it would go that well.
How could they?
And on top of it, we got these great reviews. And so some might say, okay, great, that makes things easier for us now. For me, it was like, okay, when are we going to screw this up? Because the first batch of episodes were good, and so I put a lot of pressure on myself. They wanted season 2 pretty quick. They wanted a quick turnaround. We did not have as much time preparing season 2 as we had preparing season 1. We win the Golden Globe, as you say. Michael Chiklis won the Emmy and the Golden Globe for Best Actor.
Yeah.
I mean,
dark horse, by the way.
We're sitting there in the Golden Globes at these tables, which is a real surreal experience. And first of all, the TV people are all in the back.
Of course.
So when we won, I literally took up about 2/3 of the speech time just getting to the stage.
I think you pick up a Sherpa along the way to make it to the stage.
But it's us, and it's The West Wing, and it's The Sopranos, and it's 6 Feet Under, and it's 24. And you're looking at it like, oh my God, just to be here with those shows and then to win. And frankly, I think we won in part just because we were a good story. I don't think you can, you start getting to shows like that and saying one's better than the other. You can't say The Sopranos is better than The West Wing or West Wing's better. I mean, they're all great shows there. And we just made a great story. And I think that's one of the reasons why we won. But it does put a ton of pressure. And so I got to tell you, by the time we got to season 7, and I'm really proud of that final season, and a lot of people think we ended that show really well and ended really strong. It was just huge relief to me because I was just so worried all along the way that the show was going to suddenly become less than it had been.
Yeah, you have to, somewhere in you, don't jump the shark, don't jump the shark, don't jump,
And yet you can't do the same thing you've been doing. You can't fall into a rut. You have, for a show like ours that was deemed a little revolutionary and different than anything else on TV. How do you remain different through episodes 30, 40, 50, 60? And sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. But it was always a challenge. I was very fortunate to have a great team. And you're seeing the work they're doing now. Kurt Sutter, who created Sons of Anarchy,
right.
and Glenn Mazzara, who's running The Walking Dead now, and Scott Rosenbaum, who is one of the co-showrunners on Chuck. Chick Egley, Fiero, all these people. I ended up having what was really a dream writing staff when you see what they're off doing now. And so I certainly don't take singular credit. Then you have the cast as well and the directors. But it was a simultaneously thrilling and frightening experience to be on a show that did for FX what that show did for us.
Yeah, I guess there's some careful what you wish that when you come out of the chute that hard and fast.
And it's such a grind. And as a showrunner, you're working 2 to 3 months before the actors are working,
right? And
you're working a month and a half after the actors stop working,
right?
In post and everything. And literally, I'm a fairly non-emotional guy, so the story I'm about to tell, this is very unlike me. But I remember very distinctly near the end of season 2, just standing in my shower. Not really crying, but just like, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
It was as close to crying as I could come. Just, I have to quit. I literally can't do this. Just complete and utter collapse, on the precipice of that complete and utter collapse, and then you just find a way to get up the next morning and go back and finish it.
A prison sentence is what you're describing.
At times it can be. You can forget how lucky you are to be there, because
Sure.
so many people would kill for the job that I have.
But it's also the first thing that goes out the window.
And you start, and things are so hard that you start to resent any resistance that comes from anywhere, and that's where you can get yourself into trouble. Some people get creative freedom, and frankly, it's the last thing they need.
Right.
Because
Wow.
because checks and balances are a good thing.
Yeah.
And the great thing I had at FX, and I've tried to recreate this at the other networks, and it's really easy to make fun of network idiots and all this stuff, but really, they tend to be very smart people with good ideas, and if you treat them humanely, they treat you humanely, is what I found. It's just that they have to have assurance. I mean, there are some crazy people that work in this business.
Yeah, I think we referred to one earlier.
There are some crazy people who work in this business that are installed as CEOs of multi-million-dollar corporations, which is what a TV show really is.
Sure.
Who have no education in this, or in
their minds,
who are given this just because they wrote a great script
Right.
at some point.
Right.
And so the reason why some networks do things that from the outside they seem very artist unfriendly,
Right.
is because they have a big investment and they've seen things go off the tracks.
They deal with crazy all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
And so my MO in TV has been to, as quickly as possible, establish us as the best behaving kid in their house.
Right.
And once you do that, I have found always within 2 or 3 episodes, they leave you alone.
Yeah.
Because if they have a bigger problem somewhere else, they will go to where the problem is.
Right.
So you give them the confidence, okay, we have our scripts here on time, you're liking the scripts you're reading, you let them win a few battles that are 50-50 where you really don't care. You stand up and say, I can't abide this when you do care. They respect that. It's not like they want to work with people who never push back against them.
Right.
They do. They don't want people who push back on everything for no reason. And so at FX...
And they also know, if I may, about the 3 different types of notes. You know, the creative people aren't the only ones who know that there are 3 types of notes. The executives obviously know it as well. And they probably put them in order of when they give them. All right, this one they won't give a shit about, so we'll get that one through. This one they might fight us on, but chances are we'll get our way because it's a 50-50.
Yeah. And here's one that's really important to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, you find a way. It's kind of like negotiations. Yeah.
But I like your note. You know, I've not heard it said, so it's great to hear it. And not just from someone who's succeeded at your level, but from someone who's worked long and hard in the television industry, that if you actually do behave and work hard and meet deadlines, and like you said, treat them humanely instead of like the enemy, they'll move on to the problems.
A lot of the writers that you will hear complaining about the networks are the first ones who do not turn their scripts in on time.
Right.
And once again, this may be inside baseball for your audience, but it's a big deal, especially for a show like Last Resort, which is sort of epic in its scope and lots of visual effects and a big sort of thing to do. That if we didn't give our production team and our actors time to read these complicated scripts and prepare for them,
Right.
it'd be a nightmare. And yet, a lot of the complaints you hear from people, it's what they don't tell you is, I turned in a script 48 hours before it was supposed to start shooting. And then the network, we're very concerned, and and that's a trick that some writers do. They think if I turn in late enough, they won't have time to push back on me. That's just not the way I operate. But I got lucky because at FX, they hadn't really had to manage a show before us. They had people who had managed shows in other capacities, but they knew that they had to do something different. They knew that they weren't paying as much money as other networks, and yet they wanted to be better than other networks. And so how do they do that? They very quickly established, we're going to be more artist-friendly than other places. And so on The Shield, we would disagree, not even all that much, but when we disagreed, they would make their best case and say, the final decision's yours.
Wow.
to me.
Wow.
Other than like standards and practices where,
Sure.
hey, we see nipple there, and you can't see nipple. Those things, I couldn't just get my way. But creatively, they made their case, and they were smart people. And a lot of times, I would make the change because I would see the wisdom in what they were saying. And those times that I didn't, they said fine. And I've been able to create that kind of relationship at other places as well, because I think I project some level of competence and sanity in an industry that doesn't always have those things.
Right. S&P ever asked for more Mackie nipple?
They asked for a third nipple once from Mackie.
Now, you may know we do a thing on the show called Tweet 5.
Yes.
T5 forever now.
Thank you, Dave Keckner. I did want to bring in the audience, many of which are listening live. But people who knew you were going to be on because we were tweeting each other.
Can they listen live?
Yeah, they normally...
So we're not on video live, but they're listening
That's
live?
exactly right.
Gotcha.
We're being told that somehow the feed is going out in an audible sense and not so much in a video sense. Why we bother to kill ourselves with the cameras when the rest of the podcast world could give a flying fuck is clearly just my ego.
I just like getting my makeup done.
You're good for the rest of the day. Right?
Yes, exactly. And then I look really good at the bar later when I play trivia.
When you play trivia.
Yes.
That's exactly right. When it counts. When you need to be
Exactly.
all dolled up. So you know that these come to you specifically from your fans, and they are Coke or Pepsi, this or that, no correct answer. Okay. This one actually comes through the Facebook, which I don't care for because I have no one to stalk, and I thought high school was meh. Okay. Enough of my act. It says it's from Michael Elliott Bestich. It could be a name. Ready? Creating an original property or adapting a previously created one?
Oh, creating an original one.
Hello. Joss Whedon or Carlton Cuse?
That's an impossible choice. I'll say Carlton because he gave me my first job.
There you go. LA or Chicago?
Chicago.
Please. What are we talking about here? Wasaki or Mackie?
Mackie.
Whose stylized dialogue is more fun to imitate? Whedon or Mamet?
Mamet.
That's. I think this person knows you too well. Yeah. I'm out there after the shows that I just did in Chicago, and I'm signing books and taking pictures with folks. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, if you are listening to this after my visit to Chicago and you came to any of my shows and you signed up on the iPad to have those photos sent to you, some drunk bitch hit the trash can icon on my fucking iPad in the notes section where you cannot retrieve from, and that shit is gone. So if you signed up in an email, please write to us at contact@kevinpollakschatcher.com. Or if you just want to see the Chicago photos, and you're from
That dumb sloot.
Pittsburgh, that dumb sloot indeed. You think she was drunk? What are the chances? So I was just there, and so one of the guys who came up to me was apparently from Homicide, I think, from the Chicago PD, who...
It wasn't John Felino, was it?
No, but he spoke of John Felino.
Yeah.
And I could tell there was a competitiveness, like maybe this guy had been either asked and passed on, or didn't have a lot of regard for the gentleman you just mentioned. But had still this tremendous pride within the unit, as it were, also, you know. The original title, Drive Along?
Ride Along.
Ride Along, right, of course. Who he kept saying to me, hey, next time you're in town, if you want to do a ride along, just let me know. And it was initially through the windshield, the world that these guys see, according to your dossier.
Yeah, that started actually...
While doing the Shield, probably.
Well, yeah, although at that point I didn't really want to do another cop thing right away, and but I'd always wanted to do something in Chicago, and Peter Berg...
Right.
We sort of had a mutual affection society of our work. I had loved Friday Night Lights, and Peter had really liked The Shield, and he and I had talked about collaborating on something and doing something together. And he had an idea about doing. He talked about Adam 12, about loving Adam 12 as a kid, and that sort of show, and how he hadn't seen something like that, and wanting to see something like that. I think Southland has probably occupied that territory since. And I said that we always had difficulty on The Shield coming up with really good stories for our uniformed officers, because really what those people do is that an emergency call comes in and they go and they respond, and if it's something serious, they hand it off to detectives and more important people to deal with, and then they go on. And that's kind of tough to do from a storytelling perspective. But he did talk about sort of seeing, the city. He had talked about LA. I'd already done The Shield, but he had talked about seeing LA through the windshields of cars and stuff. And I went and I said, well, let me think about that. And I came back with the idea that turned out to be right along with that sort of feel through the windshields. But let's do it in Chicago since I want to do that city, and I've already done LA and The Shield, and let's expand the universe so it focuses more on this detective. And The Shield had dealt with these people on the ground, and Chicago Code dealt with a detective, but dealt with the superintendent, which would be chief of police in other cities, as played by Jennifer Beals. And let's get into the city. You made the joke about corrupt government officials in Illinois. And I'd grown up with all those stories, and how the 1960 election had been swung to Kennedy through perhaps dubious methods and everything. And so I wanted to get into that. Then Peter just got too busy to do anything, and was like, you probably can't wait a year, so go off and do it on your own. And so that's how that show came to be.
Right. So I guess my question is, when you look for authenticity, in the case of The Shield, your initial goal was not to just show an underbelly. Rampart was coming apart at the seams in the press.
Yeah.
And there was a certain void that needed to be filled for you creatively, and you dove in and ended up with lightning in a bottle. So, as relieved as you were, and to not have to face another one of those showers, you're creative, and it's only a matter of time before you want to be back in the shit.
Yeah. Well, especially because I'd spent 4 or 5 years here in LA without getting any work as a writer.
Well, and everyone wants you to.
And you quickly develop a depression mentality about, am I never going to work? And then you get your first job, and all that matters to you is, can I keep that job?
Right.
And can I get hired the next year? And then you get more success than you imagined, but I inherently understood that would go away at some point, and that I would not be the flavor du jour. And so to me, it was like, I looked at it as kind of the career of an athlete. An athlete has a specific amount of time where they can maximize things, and that's what I'm gonna do. And so you want to do more while you can do more, because I'm very aware that 5, 10, 15 years from now, Hollywood might not be interested in what I have to say.
Right. Well, let's. The last thing, well, not the last thing, but another thing I was very curious about in the course of the last resort process is Martin Campbell to direct the pilot. He of Casino Royale and so many other.
GoldenEye. He revitalized the James Bond franchise, not once, but twice.
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost near death both times.
Yeah.
And you can't say he did it on his own, but he was a major player.
Well, that is a director's medium.
Yes.
So then the question always for me is, how do you get someone, I mean, there's financial reasons. As everyone knows, you direct the pilot, you own a piece of the show forever. And if you're in the directing business, you have an agent in your face, even if you're successful in the film world, saying, can you just do the TV pilot for me, please? Because how exciting for you in your process is it to get, I mean, was the design, let's get somebody from the film world to give it a larger than life? Because this show is a spectacular and also a spectacle at the same time. So you got to go big.
Yes, and yet what appealed to me was not just that he had done those movies that you talked about. He also directed my favorite episode of Homicide, Life on the Street, ever. In season 1, he did the famous 3 Men and a Dina episode that took place almost entirely in an interrogation room with Andre Braugher and Kyle Secor and a guest actor named Moses Gunn. It was almost a 3-person play that was one of the best episodes. That was one of my favorite shows of all time, and that was one of the best episodes of that series. And so yes, he had done the big epic scope thing, but he'd also done the camera here, get the great performance, get that thing between these people, which was important to me. But yes, how do you get a guy like that? He likes your script. He likes the idea. We all know that movies, they're making fewer of them each year.
Yeah.
That they're appealing to a younger, more base crowd each year with these movies, and we had something he was interested in telling. And
clearly the script spoke to him.
It did.
So for you, how exciting is that? I mean,
it's very flattering. We thought we had something good, and when somebody of that caliber wants to sign on board, it validates that.
Right, but I mean, during the early stages of the process, you've got the network notes, you've got the network feedback, you've got various different camps weighing in. Mm-hmm. You want to shoot for the moon in terms of your director. You want to have a scope that's cinematic. And so, in terms of these camps you're hearing from during the early stages, I guess it seems obvious to me, but I wanted to hear it from you, that landing someone of his stature, especially since you mentioned the TV episode that blew your mind, at those early stages when you need these moments of confidence and not just validation that you're good, they like you, but rather this fucking thing has a shot, man.
Well, and there's so many places where things can go wrong.
Yeah.
When you're making a pilot. If you get the wrong director, if you get the wrong actor in any of these roles, if you get the wrong DP who just makes the look screwy, if you've written a scene incorrectly, your scene reads well but it doesn't play well, all these things can happen along the way. And so getting Martin was just a huge security blanket, because he is someone who really has supreme confidence and yet is also a collaborator. There are these people who come in, I know what I'm doing, and get out of the way.
Right.
But that's not how it works in TV. I'm going to have a big say, and guess what? I have final cut in TV.
Yeah.
The director doesn't. And so we got to find a way to work together, because we got to make it work, and he did that. And he was someone that the actors respected, and interesting, they also feared him. He got together with the actors, and I'm not sure which movie he was referring to, but he said to them, he sat them down and said, "I once fired Robert De Niro. So none of you are going to do these things that you're all going to get on board, or I will fire you."
Wow.
And that threat seems credible if you fired Robert De Niro.
And as you mentioned, Andre Braugher worked with him.
Yes, that had
been, he probably told
that had been 15, 16 years earlier, but had a good experience, and
right.
So that wasn't a problem, and no one ultimately needed to be fired. But you have somebody that comes in and has a vision, and this show had all sorts of, it wasn't on the level of the stories you hear of Apocalypse Now and the production issues they had, but we did survive one of the biggest storms Hawaii has seen in 20 years, record hail falling. It destroyed our submarine set because we had the submarine set outdoors so that we could put on a gimbal so that we could move it and shake it around during the battle sequences and everything. And it's one of those things, because you assume everyone really knows what they're doing in their job. And Carl Gadjasek, my partner, and I, who co-wrote it with me, we show up in Hawaii, and everyone's so excited to show us the submarine set. And it looks spectacular, it looks great, and it's built outdoors, which we knew was happening. And we see this sort of flat black awning that they've put over it, sort of flat like this. And literally one of the first things Carl and I said was, will that hold if it rains? And we looked at each other and go, well, surely they know what they're doing.
Instead of
like a tent thing. And so
why would they know physics?
So day 3 of production, one of the biggest rainstorms that comes, and in the middle of the night,
crushing.
It collapsed into the submarine set. All this water, all this electronics got shorted, and we're supposed to film there for the next 4 days, and now
That's not happening.
They can't film for 5 days, and now schedules are getting mixed up, and we were waiting to cast our final role that wasn't going to work until a week and a half later, and now that needs to film in 2 days, and you better cast someone. Scott Speedman's wife in the show, and through all that, Martin Campbell very calmly was like, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and really helped us get through it, and so. The pilot is just much better for his involvement.
Is there any moments during that where anything feels like an omen? Or you just keep working? You don't have time to worry about shit like that. Got to keep moving forward.
There are a lot of superstitions in Hawaii. You may have seen the Brady Bunch episode where superstitions came. We were told, and now I have to question these superstitions, that the gods were smiling down upon us. We did a blessing on our first day of filming, and it started to rain. I was like, oh, that can't be good. And, oh, no, the rain's considered a good luck thing here. So there are all sorts of things that seem to predict great success for the show. And I will have to question some of those signs now.
Yeah. Next time they say, no, let the dog piss on the actor's wardrobe. That's a good luck thing. You might want to question it.
Yeah.
So, as a young playwright in college, thanks to Least We Forget, and then I want to get to a very special question from a former actor that you worked with. Lest we forget Doug Anderson and his epiphany that he bestowed on you, saying, I'm going to be teaching a playwriting class, and you should come along, young man.
Yes.
You had your a bit of a jock playing soccer, an economics major, when this moment happened.
Yeah.
Came to you out of nowhere, basically. My first question was, were you just trying to get laid? Because most athletes who find the theater department are pretty much just trying to get laid.
Well, who wasn't trying to get laid? But I'm not sure I can say that that's why I took the course. It didn't come completely out of nowhere. I went to this very, very small private high school in Rockford, Illinois, where there were 13 kids in my class.
What?
There were about 60 kids in the whole high school. And yet we were soccer power. It was very strange. Like literally 20% of the school played on the soccer team, and we would play against schools with 1,500 kids and beat them. But one thing I did was I did theater there. I got into theater. Once again, that's where I developed my mediocre acting skills for the stage. And we had a great theater teacher there named Ginny McDonald who exposed us to that. I was doing a Tom Stoppard play as a junior in high school. I was doing The Real Inspector Hound, and so I was introduced to that. I was introduced in my English class there to a lot of absurdist theater, to Ionesco and Waiting for Godot and things like that. And so I had an interest in the performing arts. And so but I was also a math guy. Math was my big subject, and thought I wanted to get into business and economics, and
that seemed like the career path.
And my father, and listen, my parents were borrowing money to send me to college. I had taken out a student loan to help pay for it. I went to a relatively expensive college for our very solidly middle class upbringing, and I was going to be in debt.
Clearly, they shot the wad on the tiny private high school.
Well, and they were spending money on it. My mother was a public school teacher who chose to send her son to private school because she thought it would be a better education for me. And so there are all sorts of stories, and they're great stories about people who have struggled through awful circumstances to somehow emerge victorious and succeed in our business. I'm an example of a nurturing family who sent me to a nurturing college where I met nurturing professors who encouraged me and ultimately got me to a place where I won some playwriting awards that brought me out here to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And
where you were pampered around in a limousine for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And Doug Anderson was the professor in college. The reason why I got into theater in college was I needed a minor to go with my economics major.
Right.
And I just thought, I'm dealing with numbers and all this stuff on the economic side. Maybe as a minor, it's only one class a semester, I'll take theater over here. And I took these theater classes, and in one, I had to write a 5-minute scene that other kids in the class would act in, and we performed that on the last day of my freshman year in college. And
that's what got Doug's attention.
And Doug said, I really liked your scene, and you should come take this playwriting class. And I said, well, what time, because I already signed up for my classes for the next semester. And I said, well, when is it? He says, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2:45 to 4:15. I said, can't do it. I have soccer practice then. I was on the soccer team, and practice started at 4. And I went home to Illinois, and I spent about a week, and his words just sort of never left me. And I started thinking to myself, well, how often is it that somebody in that position kind of seeks you out and says you may have a skill for something? And so I called the soccer coach, and I quickly realized this wasn't Division I football. This is Division III soccer. I forgot to coach didn't care if I took a class at 4:15.
Also, Brendan Dossier, you were not exactly the star on the soccer team.
No. I played on the JV my freshman year, and I rode the bench my sophomore year. And so I signed up for this playwriting class. I started writing plays there, and
if I may, though, you had your own epiphany. I don't want to give all the credit here to Mr. Anderson. But rather, I don't know that I had my shit together at the age that you were when you were a sophomore. I, of course, graduated from college before my sophomore year. My friends called it dropping out, but give it a name. That's wildly young to have that sort of wherewithal to say, wait a second, this fucker cares and he sees something in me that I didn't really know was worthy of such validation. I should probably put aside my 20-year-old interest in running around a field. That's pretty damn mature.
Well, listen, I grew up, I don't want to act as if I grew up in hard circumstances.
You made that clear.
Because I didn't. But the city I was growing up in was going through a lot of hard circumstances. Rockford, Nightline would come to Rockford during the recession of like 81 to talk about how bad things were. Like we were the example.
Wow.
Money Magazine routinely named us as one of the 10 worst cities in America to live in. I knew, there was a Chrysler plant right outside town where, if they were making cars, it was a big deal, and if they weren't, that was a big deal. I saw a lot of struggle. I saw a lot of people. I saw a lot of my friends never escape that town. And not that you need to escape, because I love it there, and not that you needed to, but I wanted to try something else. And so you didn't take opportunity for granted.
Right.
Where I came from. You didn't take a chance as something that could be easily sort of poo-pooed.
So you're insisting this was instilled?
Yes, and I had really good parents, and very different parents. I had a very conservative accountant father, and a very liberal English and theater teaching mother, who would go to the polls and cancel out each other's votes on election day. But God forbid, one of them would let the other go and they not go. And so I was a kid who grew up hearing both sides of the argument, who understood sort of basic, realities from my father, while, having some of that liberal pie in the sky, reach for your dreams, from my mother. And that's not to say my father didn't do as well.
No, but the balanced approach.
But there was a real balanced thing, and growing up in this town where there were tough times. In the late 70s, early 80s, when I was in middle school and high school, it wasn't a dangerous place to be, but it was an economically depressed place to be. And opportunities. I'll tell you this. I've talked about this a little bit before, but who was from Rockford was the band Cheap Trick.
I think everyone knew that. Nope.
And that was a big deal. You think about the late 70s, early 80s, once again, live at Budokan and Dream Police. There was an argument to be made that for 2 or 3 years they were one of the biggest bands in the world.
You could make that argument for sure.
And Rick Nielsen, the lead guitarist, lived 50 yards away from the school I went to, from the high school I went to.
And everyone knew it.
And everyone knew it. And this sounds so, I tell this to people and they can't believe it, but it was a huge deal to me that they were from Rockford and that they had gone out and created something creatively and had become big successes.
Around the world.
Around the world. It was like proof that like you could come out of that place. Because when I came to Los Angeles, I literally knew no one. I had no connections. I had nothing, and you can't even imagine going from a life in Rockford to being in Los Angeles and working in this industry. It just seems like such a far thing, and yet here were these guys who sort of did it. That was a big deal. Yeah. So it's a strange story, but it always affected me.
Perfect. It is now time for a brand new segment on the show. We will need a graphic at some point if you guys want to think of some ideas. It's called Mind Your Q's and C's. You like it?
I don't want to know what C stands for.
Well, I think you do, though. What is it? It's time for questions and/or comments by a friend of today's guest, in this case, a former guest of the show, the Michael Chiklis.
Chickie.
The Chickie. What did I tell you? So I reached out to him, and I said, Shawn's coming on the show. How about a little insider trading? Ask him how many times a day people ask him to make a S.H.I.E.L.D. movie and tell him to do so. By the way, me too. Ask him what kind of razor he uses and if he stops at his head or shaves more than just there. And on a serious note, ask him to speak to the challenges and differences between cable and network TV and the effect the S.H.I.E.L.D. had on that sea change. We've gotten a little bit down the third one. The second one's none of my damn business. But how many times a day?
Well, my wife shaves my head.
Every time?
I shave my face. That's how it goes.
Is it every time
Yes.
that you allow the wife to shave the head?
Yes.
Or insist?
Yes, I was losing my hair. We'd been dating like a couple months, and I had been losing my hair, and I'd been considering going full Michael Jordan, for a little while. But you've got to secure the girlfriend first before, because you don't really know what kind of head you have for this until you try it. And so I'd gotten to just enough of a stable enough point in our relationship where I said, well, yeah, why don't you do that for me? And she shaved it, and I kind of liked the look, and
she was cool with it.
And I've since married her, and she's done it ever since. So I go from here down, she goes up here for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
How long before the S.H.I.E.L.D. did that take place?
Did I meet her?
No, the shaving of the head.
February of 96 was my first head shave, because Kathy and I started dating in January of 96. I waited like a month and a half.
And the fact that Chickie had decided his own damn self
Yes.
to go sans hair.
Yes, I've been asked a lot of times, well, how egotistical are you that you cast someone in your own image as Vic Mackey? And I say that's not how I envisioned the role at all. I had always envisioned it as, whatever the TV equivalent of, 35-year-old Harrison Ford was. That's what I was looking for. And then you have to remember, in 2001, when we were casting this, you'd say this is a show for FX, and people would just look at you like this was the craziest thing ever.
Right.
And this will never succeed. And there were literally agents at big agencies, including my own, who wouldn't send me. My own agency was like, we don't really want to send some clients over. And so there were some that were like, well, if you want to make an offer, maybe he'll talk to you. Like for people who were like completely wrong for the role. And the people who were coming in, I tell a story where Clark Johnson, who directed the pilot, he and I were in the audition room, and people were coming in reading Vic Mackey. And I got to say, I felt pretty good about the script. I felt that it was really well written. I was feeling my oats a little bit about the whole thing. And then people came into audition. And and just slowly it chipped away at my confidence as I would see people come in and the scene's just not playing well. And at one point I leaned over to Clark and I said, maybe I'm not as good a writer as I think I am, and maybe the script isn't as good as I think it is, because this stuff just isn't playing that well. And about 2 hours later, Michael Chiklis came in. He had the vision to forget that this is FX and they haven't done anything. He read the script. He saw the role. He wanted the role. He said, I will come in and audition. And he came in and auditioned, and we did like 4 scenes. It was probably a 15-minute audition, and came in and, that same thing that you saw in the pilot, just grabbed it and he got up and he left and he closed the door, and I turned to Clark and said, no, I'm a great writer. And it was an example of having an open enough mind. It's the same thing I said earlier about you writing something and allowing it to be a little different than you imagined it in your head. I allowed Vic Mackey to be different than I imagined in the head. As soon as I opened up my mind and allowed Michael Chiklis to come in and present his vision of it, then that's who Vic Mackey became. It became a combination of what I envisioned and what I wrote, along with what and how he played it.
Yeah, well, if you were to actually draw a spectrum, if you knew how to do that, you could technically put Michael Chiklis on one side and Harrison Ford on the other.
You could.
You could create a chasm between them. So you went from that vision
Yes. Although they both embody a certain manhood and a certain strength.
Without
so
question.
very physically different and different types.
Right.
But
I just meant the sort of typical leading man from a creative standpoint to a character actor who embodied the same strength, the same virility, and the same...
We did a lot of things differently.
Danger.
CCH Pounder played a character called Claudette in the show. In the original script, the character was called Charles because it was a man.
He kept the C.
Kept the C. Literally, that's how lazy as a writer I was. When I changed, I was like, oh, what's a C name for a broad? Came up with Claudette. But her agent, she had just finished a HBO movie with Clark and enjoyed the experience and was like, oh, Clark's doing this pilot. Let me read it. And she read it. She's like, there's no role for me. And her agent read it. I was like, well, you could play. They got this one role for a man, but there's no reason why you can play it. She called and we let her come in and she did great, and I thought, oh, that would be more interesting if this was a woman. So you allow those changes there as well.
Yeah, well, that's pretty damn exciting. I should not be concerned at all that the camera, my camera in particular, at one point the screen, which usually has something on it, went away, and you're watching everything. Okay, good. Not that I'm aware of anything like that while the guest is talking. Why would that catch my eye?
Well, things have gone so well visually with the show already. I'm sure everything's fine.
You don't like being a part of our history, Mr. History Maker? I found this wildly interesting, and look, if some of this feels too inside to you, as you were saying, making the inside baseball reference, please understand that when we have a Chris McQuarrie, when we have someone who's the literary type, we're tapping into an audience that is just as passionate about that as Paul F. Tompkins coming here with the shenanigans. Writing the Bible for the show, becoming a fan of Cheers character Sam Malone would somehow prove valuable when establishing the rules of Vic Mackey. I found that somewhat fascinating in your dossier.
Yes. Cheers was a hugely seminal show for me. There were two things that both happened at the same time. I'd have to look back and see how far apart they were. One was the movie Diner. The other was the TV show Cheers. They came out within a year of each other, I believe. And they were the first time that because I was a kid who grew up on TV. My mother had to work at school until about 6 p.m. My father worked till 6:30 or 7.
I think when you made, if I may, the reference that Hawaii is superstitious and you connected that to the Brady Bunch, we pretty much connected.
We did that.
Yeah.
So I would come home from school with my brother and we would watch TV for 3 hours.
These are the things you did.
You just did that. And so I was very unaware of how the sausage was made. I just watched my TV shows. Cheers was the first time where I was watching it going, why is this TV show better than everything else? And was able to connect to, they're writing funnier lines and they're writing more interesting stories. And I started to pay attention to who are these Charles brothers?
Yeah.
I thought Jim Burrows was a writer as well because it was all three of them would be listed at the end. But
exactly.
But I was like, well, who are these people? What are they doing? And I want to know more about that. And then when I saw Diner, the movie, I was just so fascinated with how those people spoke,
right.
and all that. And what you're making reference to, I think I was quoted once talking about. There was always a lot of talk about Vic Mackey and what direction you should go with him. And I had read an interview with the Charles brothers where, a lot of people thought they had made a big mistake by hooking Sam and Diane up at the end of season one.
Right.
And I'd read where one of the Charles brothers said that the character of who Sam was, if he couldn't bed that woman in the first season, then he wasn't the character they had created. And so they understood the pitfalls that they were heading towards
Right.
and the dangers that they faced in putting them together, but they stayed true to who they thought that character was. That womanizing character would be able to get Diane Chambers in bed within the first season of that show, and then they lived with those consequences. And
For better or worse.
For better, and they found it. And I always found that fascinating. And so to me, I really try to apply those rules to Vic Mackey, who is a character we've created, and even if it creates some story problems for us going forward, let us remain completely and utterly true to our character.
Character assassination is probably what throws me off the train of any television
Yes.
show. Always.
Yes.
And it's amazing. It's how I think The Office jumped.
Happens more in comedy, I think, than drama, because
gonna say
they'll
The Office.
sacrifice it
Yeah.
for a joke.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you get 3 seconds of laughter, but you kind of chip away at what
Right.
what is true.
There was a moment on The Office, I think, where we said, everyone has become Michael, basically.
Everyone just became such a parody of themselves, and it was especially in the character of Kevin.
Right.
They made Kevin, that character just
Why
so,
did he talk like this all the time?
Yeah, like he
Yeah,
did,
like,
he
what's
went
happening?
from talking like a little affected to like just completely affected.
Too
There's actually
mentally
a
challenged. A little bit, yes.
There's
In fact, they did a story where
They thought-
Amy Ryan thought he was mentally challenged.
Right.
Yes.
But everyone became an idiot. Every character they threw under the bus one after another. Yeah, it is, I guess, the new version of jumping the shark that happens from within, where this character assassination.
Well, and let me defend my Office Brethren or other shows. It's very hard to make these shows. You're under very tight deadlines. In dramas, and so it's impossible for me to go back and watch my episodes without seeing a bunch of mistakes we've made along the way and things that I would do differently now. And you think about how your mind works when you're fatigued. And think about, as a showrunner, you are constantly fatigued.
Yeah, there's never a moment when you catch up.
And so it's amazing when you make the right choice.
It's actually absurd that you could ever make the right choice, quite frankly, given
Yeah.
the level of fatigue that you're
And it's hard when you make an hour of television and or a half an hour in their case, and someone will point to the 5 seconds or 10 seconds where
Right.
you've completely lost them.
Yeah.
It's
No, you're right. And
it's hard.
also, don't they say that the half-hour single camera are the worst hours and the most fatigue available? And it used to be always you would hear 15, 16, 17, 18-hour days on 1-hour dramas or something that made it the hardest job in show business versus the sitcom.
I think the hour-long drama is harder than the half-hour one, only because if you think about it, they film these half hours in 4 or 5 days, and so they'll have weeks off because they're only making 22 or 24 episodes a year. We're taking 8 business days, and generally on our show, on Last Resort anyways, we'll have a 9th day where we're shooting 2 episodes at once. So we film 8 days, and then the next episode starts to film, but there are 2 or 3 or 4 scenes that we still need to wrap up from that episode. And so you've got one crew with one group of actors, one place, finishing the previous episode while different actors with a different director and a different crew are off filming something new. It's rough. And you're a lot more exterior work. We just filmed an episode that will air in a few weeks where we spent 3 days on an actual boat, 2 days at port, but 1 day
Out at sea.
15 miles off out to sea, where we filmed the entire day.
And how many people warned you not to do that? Just from a technical production.
Nobody.
Really? Wow.
We were told the challenges, and we were told the increased costs that it would create, but it was a powerful enough story that we felt it was worth doing, and it was a real challenge, but we came in on time and not to budget, but we didn't exceed the overage that we agreed we would do on this episode.
Right.
And it turned out really spectacularly, and you're not going to see anything like that on TV, but that you can't tell me that's not harder. These people had to get up
of course.
before dawn,
Of course.
get their makeup done, on the port, get on the boat. The boat left for like half an hour so that it could be 15 miles offshore when the sun came up. And then we had 11 hours of daylight to film.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you can't tell me that Modern Family's harder than that.
All right, I'll stop trying. I'll stop trying to beat this dead horse. Was there any argument, this comes to us from @Renee_French. She had a birthday, I believe, quite recently. If not yesterday, the day before, Renee French had a birthday, I'm pretty sure. Was there any argument over the mammoth scene where Dutch kills the cat?
No, there's a funny story though,
Please,
David, and that. Yeah, so spoiler alert: we kill the cat in season 3 of The Shield in pretty spectacular fashion. You know, it's so interesting. You can kill all the people you want in a show, but you go after household pets, and we made PETA's 10 worst list that year.
I'll bet.
And I love, you know, I grew up. My mother raised show dogs, and I was, you know, so I spent my whole childhood, you know, feeding and cleaning up after dozens of dogs. So I love the animals, but yes, we had a thing where to really quickly just tell the story for those who haven't seen it. Clark Gregg, the great actor, was on our show playing a serial killer whom Dutch, played by Jay Carnes, had sort of captured, and it was a whole psychological episode about Dutch trying to understand the psychology of why this person would kill, and Clark Gregg's character talked about the power of sort of seeing someone's life sort of disappear and drain out in their eyes at that moment of death. Right. And we built Dutch to a place where he was really trying to understand the psychology of it. And we had laid in earlier in the episode, and even the episode before, I think, about this sort of wailing, loose stray cat outside his house that was sort of keeping him awake. And when we originally wrote the episode, we had Dutch come out and grab this cat and start to strangle it. And then come to the realization, oh my God, what am I doing? And sort of release the cat, and the cat runs off. And that's what we filmed with David. And David did just a spectacular job in the episode. I mean, I've never met a director that actors love more than David. And David loves the actors. He makes them stick to the lines, but he really makes them feel loved. And the whole episode turned out great, except for this final scene where I'm looking at it, just sort of fell flat. I'm like, boy, this episode really works great, but the ending really feels flat. And I'm like, I really feel like we pussied out in the writing of it. You know, that we thought on TV we can't have one of our characters actually strangle a cat, but the reality is it would be much more powerful if he actually did. And then realized, oh, there was nothing there to see in the eyes. Do you know what I mean? There was nothing there, and I sort of got hoodwinked by this guy, but I did this awful thing, and now I feel awful. And so we very rarely reshot things on The Shield. We just didn't have the budget for it, and we tried to get it right once. This was one of the rare times where I said, I think we need to reshoot it. And so I wrote to David and said, listen, great episode, it's fantastic. I think the final scene doesn't quite work because of how we wrote it. I think we want to have Dutch kill the cat now. Can you come and film this? Can you film the pickup scene for us? Turns out he couldn't. He was going up to San Francisco to direct a play and couldn't make the things, but sort of said, Scott Brazil, who was our producer director, have Scott do it, and good luck to you and everything. So we went and filmed it and got the whole thing, and it eventually became one of the seminal moments in our show. It was the right decision, but about 5 days later, after we filmed it, I got this letter from David Mamet, and he has this very, particular, specific sort of insignia on his thing, and he's old-fashioned. He loves to communicate via written. He always writes notes. No one gives better gifts than Dave. He's given me these amazing knives. He knows from Chicago. He found this bottle opener from the Chicago World's Fair.
Wow.
He got me an old spoon from the Fox commissary in the 50s. He finds these gifts. And they all come with these meticulous sort of handwritten notes. So I opened up this note on David Mamet stationery, and all it said was, "Dear Shawn, so thrilled that you decided to kill the cat. I hated that fucking cat, Dave." And I kept that. I still have that note somewhere. It just made me laugh so much. So there was no fight with Dave about doing it.
No.
But that was one of the rare times where we saw a cut, decided it wasn't living up to what we wanted the show to be, and so we filmed something new, which is much more common in a lot of TV shows, and certainly in movies where you're figuring out a movie as you go. But for us, it was very rare. We just didn't have the resources to be always going back and
But then, as you say, became such a seminal moment in the show.
Yes.
So much so that a question came via the internet about this very topic.
Yes, that would have aired in 2004. So 8 years later, people still want to talk about Dutch killing the cat.
Yeah, that's pretty spectacular. No, really, to be able to look at your work and have an objective view, but also to figure out the puzzle.
Well, it's so interesting because we're obviously very proud of the Shield, and we're now getting, and it was the kind of show where certainly young people didn't watch it, and parents wouldn't let their, it was very extreme in a lot of circumstances. So you are now getting a generation of people who, through DVD, and the Shield is now streaming on Amazon, I think, is going to be rolled out onto other platforms in the next month or two to be streaming. You are getting, I get on Twitter all the time, people discovering the Shield for the first time, in the same way that you must with some of your movies. People, go back and see The Usual Suspects.
There's a number of films that most people still have not seen, yes. I believe that's your point.
No, but the movies that you're proudest of,
yes, it's ridiculous.
People are discovering them.
It's ridiculous. I have 20-year-olds coming in my stand-up shows, and I'm thinking, why are they here? They can't possibly want to hear Peter Falk or William Shatner, even for that matter. They do want to hear Christopher Walken. But the reason they're there is because, to this day, the movie from 1994, it's, it came out in 95 actually, but itself is coming up on 17, 18 years, is still generating a new audience. By the time you're a sophomore, still in college, if you can't speak Suspects, you're a loser. Well, that's ridiculous for someone who made this little thing all those years ago.
Not ridiculous to me. It's one of the seminal movies of the last quarter century.
Please keep talking about that.
It is. It really is. I've probably seen it 7 or 8 times. I can't get over it.
There's lots of great stories about it in my book, which you, sir, will
Is your book for sale?
Which you, sir, will be leaving.
Could someone get that book?
Could
someone purchase that book?
Someone could. You cannot. I've signed one to you already. It's in your gift bag.
So you're saying for the holiday season, someone could buy your book
I'm saying,
and give it as a gift to a loved one.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And if I may quote my former co-star from Usual Suspects, who has a quote on the book. He says, "A book I couldn't wait to." You would say couldn't wait to
put down.
Yeah.
Like you were going to remember, and you don't remember anything. Like you were going to remember this.
Everyone takes a shot at me in the book, and I was killing in Chicago with some of the stories in the book, but one of which was just what Matthew Perry wrote about me, because he ended up writing it all about himself. I had everyone talk smack about me, and he just ended up talking about himself all the time.
But so you've experienced it. You've done something that's iconic in nature, and that's what's great about TV and film is that it exists in perpetuity, and people will discover it along the way. And one of the things we always try to do in The Shield, which I give myself some credit for now, is I really thought 10 years in the future with that show, meaning that I really limited the number of pop culture references. I tried to make the show a little bit timeless.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean to say that you can't look back and find some things that are dated, but we did the best we could. And as a result, I think the show holds up. And I think of The Usual Suspects, that movie seems timeless in many ways to me.
By design, in the same way.
There you go.
Yeah, there's no reference to current politics or events.
And these people who sort of make these things just to be watched on Thursday night, or in the Shield's case, we were on Tuesday nights. I was far more concerned with how the show would be perceived 5 years and 10 years down the line than what people would think that night of that episode. I wanted the show to exist in that way.
Well, that's pretty damn wonderful, honestly, to have that sort of view while in the shit. But, it is by design.
Well, I was also someone that I discovered a lot of great TV after the fact. I was someone that I didn't watch Hill Street Blues when it came on. I discovered Hill Street Blues on TV Land, like in 1994.
TV Land.
And watched every single episode of Hill Street Blues over like a 3-month period. They had like 1 or 2 episodes a night that they would repeat. And I just caught it and started watching. And so, so those kinds of things,
when they're timeless, this T-shirt, as a matter of fact, was purchased last weekend at the Greek Theater, where we went and saw the Monkees perform, who I, of course, am old enough to have seen when the television show first came on. Jamie, on the other hand, was fortunate enough to come home from school your own damn self and see.
They were on Nick at Night when I was growing up. So but I, as a child, didn't realize that it was a rerun.
Right.
Like I didn't know there was such a thing as a rerun, so I thought that they were. Like these were current shows, and they were like that age.
And Mike Nesmith was only in his 20s.
Yes, exactly. So whenever I found out that it was
very disappointed when an aging Davy Jones hit on there, apparently.
Yeah.
No, I was a Mike Nesmith kind of gal.
Yeah,
but yeah.
You wore the authentic Mike Nesmith hat.
I did.
Sir, you should start preparing your Larry King game. I don't know that you spent any time thinking about it ahead of time.
Okay.
Did you get far enough into any of the episodes to understand even what I'm talking about? You've heard tell?
Yes. In the episodes I've seen, I haven't seen that particular game, but I know what you're talking about, and I'm
I did mention
prepared.
The meta moment. Shall I go over the rules with you again?
Yes, some useless fact about yourself.
Well, it's not
some funny sounding city.
Funny sounding city, yes. The factoid is about Larry. You are, in fact, Larry King in this bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So I need a bad Larry King impression.
It'll be bad.
See, now but to me that's funny. If you were to do a suddenly great Larry King impression, I'd be bored.
I'd be stepping on your toes.
Well, a little bit. I do a horrible one, again by design. But this allowed Larry to say to me in the ultimate meta moment, "How do I do a bad Larry King impression?" So the bad Larry King impression, and then as Larry, sharing something about him, like his first ride on a pterodactyl, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
You can go anywhere with Larry's King's Things. You know, the crap used to write in USA Today. An Oreo cookie is still the best thing to dip into milk. Leave my balls out of it. All right.
I believe he was a Hydrox fan.
He was a wow! And you would only know that from King's Things, right?
I believe, actually, that might have been an Andy Rooney.
Oh.
I'm getting him confused.
Either applies. But you have given our guests a little time to suss out who many times in a writer's room was asked to come up with the button in the room, in the moment. So many nights where the pizza got cold, but the thoughts waited and waited. And then the camera is suddenly, that's your camera when you're ready.
This one right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Take your time. Bad impression, something about him, go to the phone. Those are your three.
My biggest regret, not investing in fire when I had the opportunity. Bob from Sheboygan.
Yes, ladies and Jews, that's how you bring it home. I want history. You had a chance to invest in fire. I thought you were going to go with Apple, and you topped the joke by 1,000,000.
Thank you.
Although not investing in the original Apple, same joke. Nicely done.
Thank you.
And thank you very, very much, honestly.
My pleasure.
I don't often get a chance to delve into a world that I myself have no experience in and am wildly fascinated by in the few conversations I've had away from the table with someone like yourself. So to come here and share as much as you have.
It's a fun, show running's a fun gig. You're balancing so many things, and it's frustrating, but I wouldn't have any other life.
Excellent. And for the fans of yours who on Twitter, I saw you talking to some of them saying, there's a thing, I've got this thing over here, or so there's something at HBO you mentioned on Twitter, so that's percolating.
Yeah, the most pressing thing is I'm writing a pilot, Beverly Hills Cop. We're reinventing Beverly Hills Cop, Eddie Murphy and me.
Mm-hmm. Do you need to hear my Paul Reiser impersonation in order to vie for the job of the sidekick?
I would love that. Brandon T. Jackson's going to be playing the lead of the show.
Nice.
And so I'm writing that for CBS right now. We do have a project at HBO. One of the writers I worked with on Last Resort, Ron Fitzgerald, wrote a thing that's very kind of Bruce Springsteen, Badlands-y kind of universe that really, the kind of sort of true life tale that you could only tell at HBO because not enough shit happens plot-wise. It's really very character-based.
Right.
Got a show where my friend Greg Hurwitz, who's a novelist, is writing a show for TNT based on his book series called Troubleshooter. And then working with a British writer, Chris Cole, who had a mini-series in Great Britain called Mad Dogs that we're looking to make as a mini-series over here. So
that's exciting.
That's the stuff I'm involved in now.
Yeah.
And just finished, a few months ago, writing a movie that Christopher McQuarrie may or may not completely rewrite and direct. We'll find out at some point.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the good news is, if he rewrites it, it'll be
good.
It'll be the night before you start shooting.
Oh, is that how it works with him?
That
sounds a little bit like me.
That's Professor 11th Hour, as I know and love him. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Honestly and truly. Please sit there uncomfortably for 90 seconds while I wrap this particular bad boy up. And again, there's a signed copy of the book in the gift bag for you. So you have that to look forward to. And thanks for suggesting to the fine viewers and listeners, if there are any, that it might make a nice Christmas gift. Kenny, don't you think? A damn, and a nice Hanukkah gift? Kwanzaa? Do they give the gifts on the Kwanzaa? Anybody? Somebody? All right, thank you. Our next show is none of your damn business. Keep your eyes peeled to the Kevin Pollak's Chat Show schedule to see who's coming up in the damn near future. And I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We will, of course, not be here Thanksgiving Sunday, if that's a thing, but hope to return the Sunday afterwards. Follow us on the Twitter, at KP Chat Show, I think it is, at KP Chat Show. I want to thank Elaine Ewing, our social media maven. Dr. Chen here in the studio. Jamie, as always, out there. Justin, Josh, J-Mac, the 3 J's of magic. And Keely, Keely, filling in for Samantha Ward here in makeup today. We hope to bring you a new and improved TriCaster for those of you who enjoy watching the show live, so that we may offer it to you once again. It took 160 shows to not actually go live, and I could not be happier. Wait, that's a lie. All right, until next time, and as always, write to us at contact@kevinpollakschatshow.com. Let us know what you think. Damn it, we care. We actually give a shit. Until then, and until then, get out of my face.